Hello, today we are going to go over some of the hints, tips, and rules when working with decimals. Now, hopefully you have already done a good deal of work to understand the concepts of decimals. We've already worked with some of the materials, and here we're just going over some of the shortcuts and how you can use the algorithms to do adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with decimals. So the first section is adding and subtracting. And the rules and tricks are the same whether you are adding and subtracting. Our key term here, the thing that you're going to tell yourself in your head is line up. So to add or subtract with decimals, you need to line up. Line up the numbers by the decimal point. If the numbers don't end at the same place value, then just add in the hidden zeros before you begin. Pull down the decimal point and you're all done. The biggest thing to remember here is that if there is an empty space here, it just means that there is zero of that place value. So you put a 0 in the place value to show that there's no other digit that goes there. This is where your handwriting and keeping things neat and tidy will make a huge difference. So sometimes you will see math problems where they make it sideways. That is not the way that I would solve problems with decimals. I would always use this format where you are lining them up vertically so that the decimal point will line up and every place value is directly over every other digit that is in the same place value. Now, the second set of hints and tips are for multiplying with decimals. And the key term here, what you're going to remind yourself is match. So, to multiply with decimals, your key term is match. Ignore the decimal point when you line up the numbers in the beginning. Now, I know I just told you in adding and subtracting, you always line up by the decimal point, and now it's different. Yes, remember I said that hopefully we've done enough practice with the materials and everything. This is just the algorithm and the hints and tricks at the end. So yes, for multiplication, just line all the digits up. Because just like when we're doing regular multiplication with large numbers, we're going to multiply by each place value one at a time. And then when we're all done with that multiplication, we're going to take our partial products, add them together, and then we'll figure out what is the proper part of the place value system to put this number into. So we ignore it in the beginning, because we're just interested in doing that first multiplication part. Ignore the decimal point when you line up numbers. Multiply like normal. When you are done, count up how many digits are behind the decimal point in your original set of factors. Match the number of decimal places in your final answer to the total number in your products. So if you have been working with the materials and we talked about where you need to shift your numbers, that's what you're doing here at the end, is you are shifting your final product so that it is in the correct place value. So here's an example, 1 and 124 thousandths taken 1 and 5/10 times. Now, if you remember, I like to put in a little placeholder 0 here so I keep track of all of my numbers neatly. Sometimes when you are multiplying, you will get a calculated 0, especially if you're multiplying by 5s. So I like to put a little 0 in there so I remember that's a placeholder 0 for making sure everything is still lined up in the right place value. Now if I count over here, I'll see that in the first factor behind the decimal point, in the second one, I have 1 digit behind the decimal point. So this is where I match. If I have 4 altogether, then in my answer, I am also going to move it over 4 place values. So again, key term match, however many place values you have behind the decimal in your original set of factors, make it match your final answer. Now, the part that we will talk about last is the dividing part. Now, the dividing part does have an extra little step that you need to do at the beginning. So in this case, the key term that you're going to use in your mind when you get a problem and you're like, oh, right, I remember how to do this, is shift. So there's a question mark there because you actually have to answer a little question when you start working with division problems involving decimals. So to divide with decimals, the key term is shift. If the divisor is a whole number, then don't worry. You just divide like normal, no need to shift. But if there are any digits behind the decimal point in your divisor, the divisor remembers how many groups you're making, then you need to shift. Once you have shifted the decimal point on both numbers, then you will divide as normal. So remember, whatever you do to the divisor, it must also match on the dividend. So if you make that bigger by one space, then you need to make the dividend bigger by one space too. You're basically multiplying both of them by 10. So again, hopefully we've done some work with materials and the concepts, and this is just the final last little bit where we're talking about the algorithm, the hints and tricks. So first on this example, you'll see that our divisor is not a whole number. It's 2/10. And I don't want to deal with tenths, I want to deal with whole groups, because the answer in division is how much does one whole get? I don't have a whole right now. So I will make that divisor a whole number by moving the decimal point to the right. I move the decimal point in the dividend by the same number of hops. This is the same as multiplying both numbers by 10. So for each hop, it's a multiple of 10. Place the decimal point in the answer lined up with the decimal point in the dividend. So once you find where this needs to be in the dividend, then you will just pull that straight up and put it on the line where your quotient will be written. You will then just divide the number like normal. Now the thing with this is, however, you will not be able to just use a fraction as your remainder. You will have to continue dividing by bringing down any of those hidden zeros. So if I needed, there is a hidden zero in the hundredths place, in the thousandths place, in the 10,000ths place. There's a series of hidden zeros that will continue on to infinity. So once I divide everything out, then the decimal point is already in the correct location and I don't have to worry about it. This is where sometimes you can get some kind of ugly remainders. You might notice that you have a repeating number. So if it starts saying 0.33333, or it might just continue on. So you can, of course, write the ... the ellipses, if it just keeps going and going. You could round it. However, I usually like to make a note that it's been rounded or something so that I know that I didn't just calculate that number. Or if you see that there's a repeated part, you can of course put the line over the top of that part that is repeated, and then we'll know, for example, 0.3333 forever. I just will put 0.3 with a little line over the top. So you should be able to explain these rules and tricks and be able to recognize the vocabulary, words like quotient, dividend, partial product. If you need to review any of the vocabulary, then that will help you understand the concepts better. So please enjoy working with decimals.